could you just start by just giving us a very sort of brief update of what happened to you and what led to the Safeguarding Adults review?
I was in a situation where I had my ex-wife and my carer looking after me. I got into a situation where from 2016 to 2020, I was basically abused by neglect. For example, I wasn't toileted regularly. There was one stage where I wasn't showered for 6 weeks. I was given the ability to clean my teeth, so I was able to clean my teeth, but I wasn't taken to a dentist. I was left in bed for the majority of 4 years, not completely for 4 years, because there was stages where I had to be front facing for certain people just to sort of make everything seem okay. Because I was left in bed, that's affected my body into the position, my legs, my stomach shrunk. So I've had many, many residual effects of just the fact that I was left in bed for so long.
Did you feel that you were being controlled by those people who were supposed to care for you?
Oh, completely. Because I was made to feel like I couldn't speak up, even if I was in a situation, as I said, where occasionally I'd see my family, and my mum, for example, did ask me if I was okay, even if Sarah was out of the room. I thought, I can't tell you the truth, because the minute I'm out back home, I would get reprisals, or I was in fear of reprisal. So I constantly kept quiet for a long time.
What sort of, when you talked about reprisals, what sort of things are you talking about there that you were worried about or actually happened to you?
Verbal, constantly threatened, actually. I was constantly put down. I was basically threatened to not allow anybody, by the carer, to not allow anybody in the house at all. And even when he wasn't with us, somebody would come to the door, and even if Sarah was the only one in the house with me, she would literally come in the bedroom, shut the door, shut the curtain, even more so than normal, and she literally wouldn't even breathe until they left. For example, when we had a social services review, even though, like I said, the majority of the time I wasn't showered or washed properly, on the one day that we knew there was going to be a social service review, they would get me up, they would get me dressed, they would make sure that I was shaved, so that when the social worker came round and did review, everything looked perfectly fine. And because obviously they were next to me, because it involved all of us, as you said, I couldn't speak up to as to what was actually going on.
Did you think that you had, and again, you've covered some of this, but did you feel that you kind of had any power at all to be able to resist what was happening to you? And obviously you've described the way that you were kept away from other people, but was there anything else that made it difficult for you to kind of push back and tell your story to other people?
The only way that I could do it, and I had to be very careful with this, is I had my iPad and I was able to talk to people through Facebook Messenger at the time. And I had many, many friends that said, do you want me to call somebody? Do you want me to do something? And even though I did want to get out of the situation, because I didn't know how it was going to work, I wasn't ready for that. For example, there was a separate situation where there was an accusation of drugs in the household, and he thought it came from my side of the family or something that I was involved with. He literally took my phone, my iPad, and looked through every single conversation I've ever had until I proved that it wasn't to do with me. So, because he had that extreme reaction in that example, I thought I can't have any evidence of any conversations that even mention him or the situation.
So what do you think would have helped you to kind of break that control that they had over you?
Honestly, as I've said before, I was very lucky that I had somebody who, again, as I was venting to them over Messenger, because she did psychology, she sort of read the signs in my speech, because we also did a video call. There was one time when George and Sarah went in the house on a weekend, I think, because they'd leave me for 8 hours a day on the weekend. She picked up in the way I was talking that something was wrong because because she did psychology, and she, without my knowledge, spoke to my mum at midnight. Because then mum got in touch and said, "Oh, is it safe to talk?" Obviously, because I was also under verbal threat from Sarah, as in, do not tell anybody what's going on. So I obviously had to tell Sarah, and then when Sarah came back because she was at George's, came back and saw them, and Mum saw that she was with me. Mum said, "Oh no, I was just checking in," and even I said to Mum, why did you do that? Why did you say it like that? Because now Sarah's going to be really angry, which she was. Sorry, I went back to Gina. She then explained that, "Oh yeah, I spoke to your mum after I spoke to you, and that's why Mum wants to get in touch." Once I knew that, and that's the reason Mum wanted to talk, I then said, "Okay, this is when I'm free, this is when I'm alone, we can have a conversation then." And that's what kicked off that whole process. But if I hadn't had Gina, like there are many, many people who don't have anybody like that on the outside, if I hadn't had that, I'd still be in this situation, if not dead.
If it hadn't been for Gina to just think outside the box a little bit and know something was wrong and contact your mum, you think you would still be there?
Yeah, definitely. And that's why I've said the main key that I'm going for is professional curiosity. Because somebody, not just me, but somebody in my sort of situation, we don't have the facility to do anything from the inside out. We need somebody to do something from the outside in.
So how often were you visited by professionals, Tom?
Social services did a once a year review, and even though we got phone calls from wheelchair services and hoist repair people, Sarah would go, "Oh, he's really, really ill, can't come in today." The only reason they let they would let occasionally wheelchair services or the hoist people in was if they'd literally been doing the equivalent of banging down the door for 6 months straight. I had one carer for the actual package was for 5 days a week, and then Sarah would do the care for the weekend because that would also give, at the time, us the opportunity to be a couple and not just have, a third person constantly in the dynamic. That's the way it should have worked. And then gradually, obviously I didn't know this at the time, but gradually George just stayed over the entire weekend and they just spent more time together. And then I found out during the court case that they were in a relationship, which, well, I kind of had a hint of that, but I officially found out only during the court case, and I found the level of it, which was quite difficult.
So you talked about that kind of professional curiosity. So what do you think, Tom, that professionals or services, so you talked about the wheelchair services and other things, could or should have done earlier to recognise that things weren't right and that you were actually being abused?
If you have one person who uses multiple services, one person like me or anybody who's vulnerable, who might use a wheelchair, might use a hoist, even the dentist or the doctor, if one of those services hasn't heard from somebody for 6 months, then they should have the facility to ring around the other services and go, "Have you heard from this person?" And there's about 3 or 4 services that have the same thing, then those people should be able to go forward with their gut feeling and go, "This isn't right," because nobody's heard from this person in 6 months.
Do you think there was any other sort of barriers that were in front of you for being a man that stopped people from asking you if things were okay or for you being able to get help?
The one other positive that helped me, even through the legal case, is my disability. If I was a fully able-bodied man, you wouldn't get the same help because people would just go, "Oh, why didn't you just leave?" You can almost see that it's like, "Oh yeah, this person's extra vulnerable, so we'll put extra effort in." Whereas if it's a fully able-bodied person, guaranteed you wouldn't get that.
Did you feel that you understood what your care needs were and what your life should have been like during that period?
Say, for example, you have an older person who might have the beginnings of dementia, they might not register that this shouldn't be happening to me. Part of the reason I I held out for 4 years was because I didn't want to draw my family into it, because he also threatened my mother at one stage. So I didn't want my family involved. I thought my wife at the time would give me, at least on some human decency level, sort of help me out a little bit. You know, for the first 18 months of the 4 years, I argued, I cried, I screamed, you know, I tried the hardest I could to save my relationship. Roughly that 18-month point, I thought, this is clearly not, you know, this isn't going to be working out the way I wanted to. I've just got to mentally turn myself off and just survive as long as I can.
Tom, did you feel that you had the ability to make your own decisions about your care, or were those decisions taken away from you?
I could voice those concerns and everything, but they weren't listened to. And I didn't, like I said previously, I didn't have the ability to voice it to a professional, because every time a professional was in the vicinity, I was monitored.
And do you think the professionals that you did come into contact with saw you as someone who could make their own decisions about your life?
In terms of the care management, the only level that they looked at, they directly contacted my ex, Sarah. So they would literally email her and she'd just say, yeah, everything's fine, couldn't be happier. And that's the only point of contact they had. They never contacted me. But even if they had spoken to me alone, because the house was relatively small, Sarah and George still would have heard what I'd said, so there wasn't any level of privacy in the house.
Okay, so you'd never had the opportunity to speak to anybody alone, but you don't think you would have been able to say anything to a professional just because of the layout of the house? And
I didn't even know that there was that level of parentalization. I just thought, oh, we haven't even seen any of the management. I wasn't even aware that there was an email correspondence between. So obviously, on the side, Sarah sort of made an agreement with the management to be like, oh yes, everything goes through me. And psychologically, I'm thinking, if I give control over to anybody else, it's going to get screwed up. So as much as I can, I have to do everything myself.
if you could look back, what would you wish to be done differently when those agencies were assessing you and your situation and your position in family life?
If you have a gut feeling, doesn't matter what it is, but if you see me, and even if I say that everything's all right, if you get a feeling in the general environment that something's not right, say for example, using you as an example, you should then be able to go out and ring your superiors and go, something isn't right here, I don't know what it is, but we need to either monitor and find out what's going on. The key factor is professional curiosity. You know, the fact that I've been in bed since, you know, it's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm still in bed. You know, occasionally you might be able to say, oh yeah, his back's hurting or he's not very well, but you can't constantly use that excuse. If you are able to get in the environment, look at how the people are interacting, body language, and if they're very sort of quick with their answer, like, yeah, everything's fine. Then you'd be like, okay, it seems like I'm being shoved out the door here.
Did you ever feel that you were being held in your home against your wishes?
I wasn't even allowed to, as I said earlier, even see people. I mean, my sister at one stage actually dropped a handwritten note through the door that said, am I no longer welcome in your house? Because I was told that after the fact. I found out that literally Sarah just grabbed the note, screwed it up and threw it away.
Did you ever feel that you were being financially exploited by your ex-wife and carer as well?
Completely. I mean, I only found the extent of it during the court case, but she took out 2 loans in my name, one of which I did know about because she said, oh, we're going to have a bit of a loan to take the credit cards down. And she basically used £10,000 of my inheritance just on the house. She took out the small loan, which was about £4,000, and then she took out £15,000 for a car. By the time I got out of the situation, I was in about £21,000 worth of debt, and unfortunately we couldn't get any recourse from either Sarah or George for it because there wasn't enough proof.
Tom, was there any point where you felt that what you were going through or what you've experienced could be considered modern day slavery?
Only because I didn't know that was a term, but I would use the term cash cow because I was literally there for her to get the benefits of, because obviously I had benefits, so she was using my money. And I heard during the court case that £6,000 of my money was used to build George's DJ studio. Now, I knew he was building a DJ studio, but I had no idea that it was with my money.
And is there anything now, looking back, understanding that term now, you've been through the court case and everything else and what you heard, is there anything that you would like the professionals or the public to understand about modern day slavery?
That it comes in many forms. Just because you don't hear somebody scream about it, or it can be anywhere. And people like I did can slip through the cracks. I mean, a lot of people, I'm guessing, especially in today's modern society, they consider slavery to be a racial, a racially motivated thing, but it's not. It can come in so many forms, and there are so many levels to it, and people need to be at least conscious of it.
Do you feel that you needed someone else or someone to speak on your behalf throughout your experience?
Not at the time, but maybe it would have helped because I can, even though I am very articulate, sometimes I don't know the words that are needed to get me whatever I need. I didn't know that social services needed me to say, "Oh yes, I want to leave the situation," before they could do anything. But no, they needed me to actually say, "I would like to leave," and then the whole process kicked in.
So you talked about actually that point where you had to say that you wanted to leave before things could happen. Obviously, that there was some activity that did safely get you away from the situation that you were in that was coordinated by the local authority. Just building on what you've said about not necessarily understanding what that meant and what you needed to do you feel that process worked on your behalf, or is there more that we should be thinking about doing?
The actual process itself actually worked really well. So once that door's opened, the system does work quite well. But what I learned from that situation is you have to have everything in place, buttoned down to the nth degree, before you say, "Okay, let's go." Otherwise, it doesn't work as smoothly as it should.
Is there anything, do you think, specifically that would be of benefit to professionals in understanding their role in working with disabled people that you think should change?
So, say if you get a brand new social worker and they're assigned a case who they're going to be with long term, get to learn about their disability if they're with a disabled person. If they then see me, and for example, they can see I'm more twisted than I should be or whatever, then that feeds into the professional curiosity. Maybe that would help. I don't know.
And what would you say to someone who suspects that they've got a friend or a family member who's being controlled or abused?
Please do what you can to help that person, even if even if you turn out to be wrong. It's better to ask for forgiveness later than just be like, "Yeah, there's nothing going on," and then something happens. So if you have an inkling that something's happening, please do whatever you can to investigate further.
Thanks, Tom. And in hindsight, is there anything you think you would have done differently, or that you would be able to advise anybody else who's in a similar situation to the one that you were in, having reflected on your experience, that you would advise them to do?
Even if they are your partner, don't give them complete financial control, or don't just go, yeah, you can do this for me, do that for me. Do as much as you can yourself, but I would rather somebody be safe than give control over to somebody in whatever way and end up in a situation similar to me or worse. You just never know.
Have you noticed, or maybe could you just explain to us how your past experiences still affect you now?
Oh, it's in a way, it's completely broken some psychological part because I don't let myself get into personal relationships anymore. I don't let myself get too close to people. I do not trust people. Uh, well, relatively, no offense to any of you. I, I just can't bring myself to trust people. Even if I want to, there's just a part of me going, don't, don't do it completely because you might end up in the same situation you did before. People say, oh, time heals all wounds. Time doesn't heal wounds. It just teaches you a better way to carry it.
Is there anything that you felt might have been missing to try and help you recover?
Not just me, but maybe they maybe make counselling available to them as well. If there's anything legal, maybe make the avenues easier for that because it's quite a lot of hoops you've got to jump through to get legal aid at the moment. So that's very obviously that's very dependent on the individual situation.
Yeah, of course. Tom, how important is it to you to have people believe and listen to you?
It's vitally important because I've I've survived my experience. I've got through my experience. I'm relatively okay, but I am so so set on not having anything like this happen to anybody else ever again. That's why I will do as many interviews as it takes, as many review boards as it takes. I don't want my situation to get lost within policy. I don't want it to get put in an existing framework and just become a bullet point. You'd have to make a completely new framework. Because yes, my situation was unique, but there's going to be similar situations, and I think you are going to have to make, relatively, if you can, make a new framework for it because it doesn't fit within any existing framework, as we found out.